Okay, when it is time to create the gussets for your bridge, this is a pretty important step. The gussets are going to make a big difference in how the bridge performs. So we want this to be done well, and some people choose to lay out and trace and cut with an X-Acto knife, cut out their gussets from a piece of balsa wood. And that method is fine and can get you fine results, but there's a lot of advantages to instead making your gussets using the CNC laser cutter. You're able to make duplicates of the same shape super fast, and everything comes out exactly accurately. And I'm going to show you in this video how to set up your job so that you can cut out your gussets from the laser. So we should have done a nice 1-to-1 scale drawing of the bridge, and there's a lot of good reasons for doing that. This is one of those reasons. We can take that image and we can bring it into Adobe Illustrator, we can trace those gussets, and we can get it ready for cutting out. So this is the bridge that I'm going to be working with. It has some nice gussets on it, and I want to help you understand what the theory is when we are laying these gussets out, because the wood that we're cutting this out from is stronger in one direction than it is in the other. If you apply force down the length of the wood grain, that's going to be much stronger than if you apply force across the wood grain. So it helps to understand where your forces are going to be applied. I'll show you an example here. We're going to be looking at this top left corner gusset. So let's take a closer look at that corner here. 3 members joined together in this corner. And these 2 members are going to be compression members. They push together towards the joint. We're not as worried about the compression members because we're not as likely to see failure there. This 3rd member, though, the diagonal one in this case, is going to be a tension member. It's going to be pulling away from that corner. So our gusset's main job is going to be reinforcing that connection. So we want to orient the gusset on the board so that the wood grain is running in this direction, parallel to the direction of the tension force. So let's take a look at another example. This time we're going to be looking at this gusset down here, the big central one, because that's a very important one. The way the load is applied to these bridges directly in the center, this joint is really where most of the load is going to have to be absorbed and carried. So it's a very common spot to see failure, to see these pieces pulling apart. Let's take a closer look at that joint. So the 2 members across the bottom are going to be tension members. They're going to be pulling in those separate directions, which is not terrible because they're joined together by one solid piece of wood. There's not a cut, there's not a separation here, so I'm not too worried about these pieces pulling apart. I'm more concerned about the 3 pieces above. With the downward force in the center, we're going to see this member that's directly opposite that going into tension, and it's going to be the greatest tension force on the bridge probably. So it's going to be pulling in that up direction, trying to tear these support members above away from the road deck members below. The diagonal members in this case are most likely carrying 0 or very little force, but if they do carry some force, it's going to be as tension forces in that upward direction. So we've got tension arrows pointing all different directions here. How do we line up, how do we orient the wood grain to make this gusset as strong as it can be? Again, we're trying to prevent those top 3 members from tearing away from the bottom ones. So we want to orient our gusset this way so that the wood grain is running in that direction parallel with those arrows. So now we are in Adobe Illustrator. You could use lots of different programs to create artwork for the CNC laser. CorelDRAW, AutoCAD, those are popular ones. Autodesk Inventor works, but we use Adobe Illustrator. So if I click New File, I can start getting things set up. And I'm going to create an artboard that is the size of one of the pieces of balsa wood that we have in the shop. So first I'll switch my units from points into inches, and I'll enter the sizes of one of those pieces of balsa wood, which would be 36 inches long by 3 inches high. So when I click Create, I'm going to get this artboard that looks just like one of our strips of balsa wood. Your scanned 1-to-1 drawings should be in the S Drive folder for this project. So I'm going to click File, I'm going to click Open, and I'm going to go searching for those scans. For POE, you'll find them in the POE folder. For Makerspace, you'll find them in the Makerspace folder. So bridge scans number 1. I know that I want page 4, so I'm going to type in page 4, and there we go. So I've got my one-to-one scan of this drawing pulled in. Now, it opened it up in a separate file here. I'm going to click on the drawing. I'm going to copy it, Control-C, and I'm going to paste it onto my piece of balsa wood. Now you can see the relative size here. The balsa wood is at true size, so is the bridge, and we can see how large this is, relatively speaking. Now I'm going to rotate this just so it's right side up and I can see what I'm doing is accurate. And now if I zoom in on these gussets, I can get as close as I want to them, and I can trace these outlines with the line tool in Illustrator to make sure I'm getting my gussets exactly the right shape and size. So let's start with this top corner. I'm going to go over here to find my line tool. If the line tool is not selected here, it might be the rectangle tool by default, but just hold your mouse button down and you can switch that to the line segment tool. Now I can click and draw my lines and trace the outline of this shape. I'm trying my best as I do this to make the corners link up with each other. Right now, these lines don't really look like anything because they have no thickness. I'll click back to my arrow, drag that sheet out of the way, and now I can select all of those lines that I just placed. With these selected, I can look over here on the right-hand side and I can see what my stroke is. This part's really important, so we got to get this right. Right now, there is no stroke. That's why I can't see it. It has no outline at all. I want to switch this to something that has color that I can see, so we'll make that black. And by default, the thickness comes out to 1 point thickness. That is not thin enough for the laser to recognize it as a cut line. The line thickness is how the laser tells whether it should engrave something or cut something out. If we don't get this step correct, it's going to just engrave the outlines of your gussets on the wood, and it's not actually going to cut all the way through them. So I've got to make this thinner. 0.001 will do the trick. So I'll change that thickness, and you can see that this just changed thickness in response. And now I want to reorient this so that it is in the orientation that we saw from before. I want to try to get the wood grain running in the direction of these brown arrows. So that means I've got to rotate this, and I'm sort of eyeballing it. So I'm rotating it to about that angle right there. Now I can drag this off and situate it in the corner of my piece of wood. And let's think. That gusset is identical to the gusset on the opposite side. I want to build this bridge with a gusset on the inside of the joint and a gusset on the outside of the joint. So that makes 4 of these gussets on the left side of the bridge and 4 of these gussets on the right side. That means I'd like 8 of these total. So maybe it took me a couple of minutes to do this setup, but now I can simply Control-C, Control-V, and copy my gusset right next to the other one. And now I can select both, Control-C, Control-V, and I've got 4 gussets. And one more time, Control-C, Control-V, and I have 8 of these gussets. Way faster than cutting all 8 with an X-Acto knife. Now I can work my way down the entire board, doing this over and over again. Let's just do the other center gusset here to drive the point home. Now we wanted these gussets to be running in this direction, so I've got to turn this gusset 90 degrees on the artboard. If it's not perfect, it's okay. And I'll want an inside gusset and an outside gusset on both sides of my bridge for this. But notice something interesting on this one. We have these cross members running through the middle, which are going to be sitting on top of this lower truss member. And if we want to put a gusset on the inside, that gusset needs to make way for these. So if we want that gusset to actually reach all 5 of these members that are connected here, that means it would be nice to make openings for these cross members that are just the right size. So what I can do with that is I can make a copy of the gusset. I can place it where it needs to go. And then again, I can use my tools. In this case, I'm going to use the rectangle tool instead of the line tool, so I don't have to draw quite as much. And I can draw rectangles where these 2 holes need to go. If I select those rectangles, I can verify that the stroke is correct. And I can move my drawing out of the way. And now I have an internal gusset for that joint, and I have my external gusset for that joint. And I can make the copies of this that I need for the other side. Once you have all of your gussets laid out, double check that all of them have the correct stroke, the correct line thickness, and make sure that your file, your Adobe Illustrator file, gets saved, File Save As, in the class folder, the same S drive folder where you found your drawing scans. We'll need to open it from here when we get over to the laser. Good luck.